Hey, Eric here with Two Sides of Fi. Just checking in to lay the groundwork for this episode. Format here is a little bit different than our standard format. If you're at all familiar with the show, I'm the one who's pre-Fi. I'm shooting for a target Fi date of 2024. My friend Jason reached his Fi number in 2020 and retired early, moved his family from a high cost of living area in California to a relatively lower cost of living area in California. So he's 2 years into his early retirement and I'm about 2 years away. And as I get closer to this date, I have questions and I have concerns. So I was thinking the best way to get some of these concerns and questions answered might be to actually just step into the fire lifestyle for a short period of time, try it on. And I thought the best way to do that was for me to take a trip from Maine out to California and visit Jason and see what his fire life was like. Live without work responsibilities, without thinking about finances. And of course, I had lots of questions for Jason to see how he's getting on nearly 2 years in.
Hey, each other. How are you? Good to see you.
I get up around 5 a.m. typically. It's a schedule I've had for years. I don't use an alarm. I know a lot of people like looking forward to getting rid of the alarm. It was never a thing for me. That's cool. But I get up at 5 and then make some tea, make some herbal tea, and then depending on the day, I either go right to my desk because I've got some things I want to work on, check on some things for the show if we have an episode going live that day, or pretty often I also will just go sit on the couch and watch a show for an hour or so, some TV or movie that I have been waiting to watch. So that's always starts that way. And then some chore related things, right? See my daughter off to school, take care of the dishes, and then I will, my wife gets up around 8:30. Maybe I'll do some cooking, especially in the summer when it's really hot. I'll cook stuff in the morning that's for later in the day, and I go for a walk. After that, that's kind of the chunk of time where kind of like work day was. Now it's just whatever I'm doing that day fits in that time. So I feel like high level, my days, the structure of them, like sort of the bookends are pretty similar, but what's in between is largely different now. And it changes day to day. Whereas before I'm commuting, doing the work thing, commuting home. Now that whole window of time is kind of like what I get to fill. And it's much more varied.
Fill it with?
My interests. It could be learning, it could be going out and moving, doing some hiking or something like that, pursuing some other hobby, maybe going to a winery someday. I like to cook a lot, so I definitely have done way more than that in the past, whereas Lori took on all the dinners when I was working because she's a nice person. I now do almost all the cooking for the family, so that's been a great change and something to get back to that I kind of left behind early in my career, to be honest with you.
Are you both adjusted to, coexisting in that same space? Because Lori was on her own for a while.
Yeah, I think the, sort of COVID lockdown gave us some practice even before I stopped working. I had 3 months where I was working from home in the same space. And we figured out a lot of things pretty quickly. And we've talked a little bit about this on the show in the past, I was used to having an office and a lot of quiet, and the noise of the household was new to me when I was trying to work and be on calls and things like that. And I could be pretty irritable about it sometimes. So figuring that out was really important. We communicated way better about it once we did. I was being unrealistic very clearly. I know that now. And I think we figured out a lot. Honestly, the benefits of being able to spend so much more time together have been huge. I used to travel a lot internationally as well, so I would be gone for a while. I mean, a little break from me is great, I'm sure, but Lori pretty clearly was happy having me around a lot more. And honestly, just like being in the same place, it doesn't mean we had to be doing like activities every day, although we do hike a lot together and do some, other activities outdoors together. Just being in the same room or reading, together, I don't know, it's just nice to be able to ask a question in the moment. And for just like most people, for years and years and years, we didn't work in the same place. So we wouldn't be able to have those little conversations throughout the day. Or, I don't know, I guess, to be perfectly honest with you, since I've been home, I just appreciate much more the time that I have with Lori. And I feel like I may have taken some of that for granted when I was working. I mean, I would leave for work before she got up. I would get home at dinner time, and I started to get tired by 9:30. so I'm in bed by 10 o'clock. So I mean, besides weekends, we just had those few hours a day like everybody does, and you end up taking those to like, you know, just the must-dos, like have a meal together, like talk a little bit about anything going on, and then like, you know, maybe watch TV before bed. So not always the most fulfilling time. And now it's complete opposite. We're as much time together as we want. We give each other breaks too. It's not like we have to be, you know, lockstep all the time together. But I mean, I took to writing like Lori a little note every morning, like with her tea when I bring it to her. That's something I never would have been able to do before. And it's just, I don't know, it's kind of nice. Like, it seems like a silly little thing, but it's like, just for me, it's like a very nice way to just in small ways express that, like, hey, I'm super psyched that we have this time together now, and I'm really enjoying it. The biggest part of my path to FI is something you called career leveling up. I moved a lot between companies. Our family moved to different states, moved all the way across the country. I traveled a lot. Like, that was how I got my career progression to where it got to, and the advancement I was able to get. And that came with trade-offs. And there weren't ones we always discussed, but I always like come back to this one time. It came up yesterday at wine tasting, right? Lori was upset about something that wasn't going well, and I had come home from a trip and we were talking about it, and I was apologetic. I mean, I felt bad that I wasn't there for the thing that was causing all this problem. And she was like, well, you know what? The way I think about it is, it's challenging for us now. We're making trade-offs for the time we can have later. Like, our daughter is very, very young at that time. When she's a little older and we're doing things, we're able to do more things together as a family, you know, you're going to be available. And that's true. You know, you can always second guess the merit of those trade-offs. We believe on net this has been good for us, and now I could go to things that my daughter's involved with, you know, if there was something at school, or that I can easily swap in and bring her to an appointment if my wife can't. We still take turns, don't get me wrong, we both pitch in, but I'm glad that even if it's not something I would desire to do that day, I'm glad I'm just able to be able to help out, whereas in the past, it wasn't an option. It's a big change.
All right, so it appears, at least as an outsider, you're getting up at the same time, doing the same things, right? I mean, that's pretty typical for a lot of people, I think. But you have this big hole where work used to be. And so I think a lot of people heading into, you know, retirement kind of think about, okay, how am I going to fill that hole? And how have you approached that? Like, maybe even from, like, maybe it's different beginning to now. Like, you've been retired almost 2 years now, right?
Yeah, I think it was definitely different beginning to now. I mean, at the very beginning, okay, I had some things that were constraining my time a little bit. Like, we moved, right? We moved 3 hours away, and I had to get a house set up and stuff. And then I think what I noticed is that in the beginning, I was doing bigger things, like, that took up large chunks of time. Like, I worked on a couple of courses online to build some skills in app development for iPhone. And so I would take like big chunks of time, and I would say I was filling up like half days with that stuff, kind of uninterrupted, which I guess is how I learn, and that was really fun. But I definitely realized I was starting to jam stuff in, and now I would say, so fast forward, you know, maybe more than a year after that, so coming up on 2 years, I would say a lot freer with how I spend my time. So
it's unprogrammed time?
Yeah, that's a way better way to put it. Yeah. It's way less programmed. There are things, to your point, that like naturally happen in a certain order. Wake up, have my tea, sit at the computer, take my daughter to school. But I would say the larger chunks of the day where work would have been vary a lot more. I think the biggest things I thought about beforehand were, are the numbers right? Right. You can only do so many models. Like, did I do a good job? Did I talk to the right people? Is everything in place like it should be? And just because when I pull the trigger, right, oh, there's no turning back, right? And I definitely thought about that a lot, and I can definitely think of a few conversations where my wife talked me down off the ledge because I was getting worked up about that. And I guess I don't think that's abnormal, but I definitely found myself, especially towards the end, thinking about it on and off at times. So I think those concerns were definitely part of it. I think, maybe surprisingly, I wasn't super worried about like stepping away from the work stuff. After, I think my first reaction was probably pretty similar, and it was like, am I withdrawing like too much? Like, should I be more conservative?
You mean financially?
Yeah, like focusing on the numbers a little more than I thought it would. Not like, I don't know the right way to put it, but I would say I was hyper aware of spending to the point where like Lori called me out a couple times when I would be asking her like, oh, what's this? Like just looking at, expenses coming in. And you can convince, it's like one of those things where I guess you can convince yourself like all you want in advance that the numbers are right or everything, but like once like the button has been pushed and the paychecks stop, like it's pretty natural to think like, well, is it right?
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't say I was agonizing over it. I was more conscious of expenses coming in and thinking about them and thinking about the budget and wondering if it was right. A year and a half before I retired, I started, actively budgeting, something I'd never done before, like tracking expenses. And so I had an expectation, like, I'm probably going to spend this much on like groceries and stuff like that every month, and had data to back it up. And then suddenly the first month after I retire, it's higher than that. And I'm like, well, obviously then the rest of the budget's probably wrong. Like, so I've screwed up. Even though I have 2 years of data, I'm an idiot. Like, and I'm in trouble. So now I need to like, be a little more careful, maybe spend a little less. A lot of this, I would say I was definitely trying to keep in. Like, I definitely didn't want Lori to feel like, like I didn't do a good job. Because she's always, you're being your own worst critic. Like, you've shown me this, it's right, we'll adjust if we need to, but don't worry about it. So I did keep a lot of this to myself. And I think I just needed to see more data. I needed to see more months and get comfortable with the fact that it's life, right? There's going to be spikes and things. Some things are going to go up, some things are going to go down. Withdrawal rate, we're trying to keep, it's below 3%. So like, that's one of the reasons we keep it there, because if there's noise, like, who cares? Right. So, I mean, I can't know like long term if it's going to play out the way I think, but at least on the short term, looking at the first year, second year, it's like, well, obviously it's fine. Like, there's been things that are more than I thought and things that are less. So I've definitely become more confident of that over time. And I think less about that. I'm even thinking about like dropping the kind of budgeting I do down to like, bigger buckets of stuff and not tracking quite as much, because I have a different level of confidence now, right? It's maybe next month I'll start that. I'm close.
Well, it's funny because I'm pretty sure this is going to come out after the episode where we talk about you firing your financial advisors, right? Okay, so like part of the confidence comes like not having a co-pilot anymore too, and like that's, to me, it's like it's an even bigger step, because your hand is on all of the controls. Like it's totally on you to manage it. So it's interesting to see. How long do you think it took you to get to that point?
That's a great question. Like, immediately my brain started going there when you said that. Like, how long has it been? I was like, well, it's kind of been like almost 4 months.
Okay. Since
I had the call where I said, I was going to take this on myself. And I will say that almost immediately, like 2 days later, maybe, I started thinking like, well, maybe this was a really stupid idea. I had some.
So this is like a pattern with you.
I know it is, like, and second guessing yourself and imposter syndrome. It's normal. It's
real.
Like people get that, right? I mean, I'm no better. Right. And I spent so much time in my spreadsheets and really thought through what I had done, and had a consult with a fee-only, advice-only advisor, just to kind of, revisit what I thought was true and some of the things I wanted to change slightly from how they were in the portfolio with advisors. And I think through that, and just spending really probably a few weeks, to be totally honest with you, in time in my spreadsheets and looking at my portfolio, and I agreed doing more modeling, before I said, you know what, I actually feel pretty good. So maybe it's like a full month and a half after I went out on my own without advisors, before I started to feel really confident. And now I feel good. Now I feel like I know it's the right decision. This is just the usual kind of like path when you make a big change. But in the beginning, I would say I was a little surprised by not feeling as confident as I thought I was, because I was so confident, really thinking about it for months, and then, when it happens, it's like, oh, well, maybe that wasn't right. I don't know.
Well, and it has kind of, the past 4 months have been really rocky.
Yeah, timing's great.
In the stock market. And like, you and I have had these discussions before where you tell me, just don't look at it, man. Yep. So are you able to follow your own advice?
I am, and certainly now. It was a little harder for me a few months ago, because I knew there were some changes I wanted to make. right? I wanted to add a little more conservatism. I wanted to get some things out that weren't really fixed income into more traditional fixed income. And I was nervous because I was like, well, is this the right time or whatever? And as it turned out, actually, the downturn a little bit made some of those changes easier to absorb. You know, some gains disappeared, was able to move things into...
It's funny because you told me not to look at the market, but yet you were doing it, man.
I had to. I had to. Since then, over the next, I guess it's been almost another 2 months since that time, I really haven't been looking at it. I'm very happy that I'm not. That feels good to me. But like big picture, I think I do still think from time to time, like how well tested is this model, right? And I've read the same posts you have in many cases, but that doesn't mean I'm not really second guessing sometime. Like, well, no year is like any other year. And like how many things have to happen in the world before you're like, well, this unprecedented set of events is going to drive unprecedented economic changes. And so, you know, we've talked a lot about bucket strategies and like years of cash and years of bonds, but maybe it's not enough this time. So I wouldn't say it's preoccupying me my mind all the time, but it comes up more than we probably discuss, or it like bubbles up that day where I'm like, well, I wonder, like 20 years from now, where's it going to be, or 10 years from now? I mean, I know I can adjust along the way, but yeah, I think about it. It's not making me think about making changes. It's just making me wonder, is it going to work out?
Yeah. So me visiting here and kind of trying on this like retired lifestyle a little bit, you know, that's kind of how I see this visit. Obviously, I want to catch up with you and Lori and see, you know, your family, how you live, where you live, and but you know, part of this is I want to see how you're thinking about my preoccupations. Like my preoccupations right now are, all right, spending. Like if I have to transition to spending, what is this going to look? How's it going to feel? Yeah. And as I look at you, you don't seem outwardly concerned. Like when you have visitors, you're obviously doing things that are out of your normal schedule. You're probably spending a little more money. You know, you're doing different things than a day in, day out. But I can say as an outsider, I don't see that it bothers you necessarily. But what is it like? What's the internal dialogue that I don't see?
I think on that stuff, it feels pretty good because it's like, you know, our retirement model didn't plan on Lori and I bringing in any extra income, and that budget was not built with it in mind. So when you come, other people come visit us, like we go out to eat more, we might go to, you know, a fancier place for wine tasting, something like that, and we're spending more money. And so the way we think about it is, you know, we're bringing in some extra money. That's a great way to spend it. Like spend it on experiences with your family, with your friends, and like that's fun. Like that feels good to me. That doesn't make me so anxious as like, oh, like could we take an extra vacation? Like, well, maybe is that too much money or is that okay? I actually, it feels pretty good when we do stuff like this.
Does it feel good because you have that extra income coming in, or does it feel good because you designed the right plan and you're executing on it, or is it like that the amount that you're spending is inconsequential? What do you think of those things?
I think there's merit to all of them, but I think very specifically, the first thing that comes to mind is the extra income. Oh, okay. So you didn't plan for this. I didn't. I would not say I built a budget with like, well, here's how many people are going to visit us a year. And maybe this is a good tip for you, man. You live somewhere where people want to come visit you. Totally, yeah. Like think about like, well, how much money do you really spend when people come out, right? Go to the seafood restaurant, you know, that stuff adds up. I'm like you though, I would prioritize that spending, but it's also something that I always think about as being difficult to plan for. It is difficult to plan for. The reason I thought it was multiple things is I think the second thing is also true, which is the budget is built with a very low withdrawal rate. And so we should, even though I'm still not always there yet in year 2, feel comfortable with like exceeding our projected monthly spending, because guess what? Our withdrawal rate is low. We're not talking about 4% or even 3.5%. I'm presently below 3. So it does strike me as like you still are paying attention to it, which is not a bad thing. Like, yeah, paying attention, I agree too. I would totally expect that actually. Yeah. Like I would say you have to have a pretty large pot to not like have to pay attention to it at a certain level, and so it's actually reassuring to hear that rather than you just saying, no man, it's just like execute the plan. Right. Well, let me ask you this, like how closely do you track expenses right now? Do you track expenses? I know you don't budget, but do you track expenses?
Not really.
Like, I mean, ask you how much you spend going out to eat in an average month. Like, do you know that?
No, I don't know that.
Okay. I mean, that could. Well, I guess let me phrase it as a question. Like, what about?
I'll tell you how I track it.
Okay.
Like,
Tell me how you track
I have a certain savings goal for every month, and like once I meet that,
Yep.
then
So you pay yourself first.
I pay myself first.
And
yeah.
you could, and that's how. I mean,
How do I do that in retirement?
well, I mean, that sounds kind of like what Fritz does, right? From Retirement Manifesto. He just has money that comes into the account, and they spend it. So in your case, if the money is like not going out to pay yourself first, then everything else left is conceivably exactly what you do now. So as long as that's worked for as many years as you've done it, if that's always been what you and Laura did, like maybe there's not a concern, but I can't answer that. Like for you, when you think about like switching, like, okay, I've never been tracking, and now I'm not gonna be paying myself first. There's gonna be money that I'm gonna have auto transferred every month or once a year, whatever your system is. How do you think that's gonna feel? Is something you worry about?
I mean, yeah, but I don't budget for a very specific reason. You know, I feel like the plan that I'm setting up is to hit savings targets, and if I meet those goals, then I'm assured the plan is working. And so maybe it's a little bit of a rethink on how I enter the spend down phase. But I don't know.
Well, maybe we're not so different, because that's precisely what I did when I was working.
Yeah.
I had all my savings goals, and then everything else was left to meet the monthly obligations.
Have fun.
I didn't track it at all. Honestly, until I started doing that expense tracking exercise a year and a half before I retired, if you had asked me the same question, how much you spend going out to eat a month, I wouldn't know.
Right.
Because when we finally did do it.
I know, but you were doing it like where I'm at now.
Yeah, that's true. That is a difference. Yeah. But I mean, I'll tell you again, that's an example of an area I was surprised. Like, how much do we spend on like the really discretionary stuff, like on going out to eat,
right,
or some of the not vacations, but like little things we do on the weekend, and like how much does that add up? We were a little surprised.
Yeah, and to be fair, the past couple of years have been abnormal.
That's fair. Yeah, not the best data points for you anyway.
But we look at a year-end credit card statement, for example, and say, okay, this is our annual spend, and this feels like a good life to us, But to your point, it's like, okay, maybe it doesn't capture all the nuance of like these kind of situations, and maybe the other idea there is just to create this buffer, like a bigger buffer. Like if you're not willing to track granular stuff, make a bigger buffer, or it could be working another job, because I guess that kind of segues into this idea of like you both you and your wife are working extra jobs, you're volunteering at various places, and talk a little bit about the importance of that other than financially, because you're not really doing it for financial motivation, right?
No, especially me, but I think true for both of us, if I can try to relay her words without Lori being here. Like the winery, the 1 day a week, 7-hour shift, there's financial benefits. I get some money and I get discounts on wine, which is great. But I mean, it's more about like the chance to get to interact with people, to talk, to educate. Like I'm a wine educator. I enjoy that a lot. And I haven't worked in like a hospitality job since I was in college, but I'm definitely drawn to like the idea of teaching people about something, like, enjoying time, meeting people and talking. Like, so I get a lot out of that 1 day worth of effort. And it's largely not financial. It feels rewarding. It feels fun. Like I feel like I'm doing something, useful.
You didn't always do this job, right? I mean, you got it
about a year ago.
About a year.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've done it for about a year. How you can compare the two sides of that, having some vocation and not. How is it essential, like for you? I mean, I know you get a lot out of it, but what else could you put in that hole?
I don't think it's essential. And there was even a time where, in the winter, it's a tourism-driven industry, right? When, visitors were lower, it was more boring sometimes. Some days it would be really quiet, and that just felt like, okay, that's not what I want to do. And, thankfully that time passed. It was just, a couple of, weeks were like that. But I think a lot of things could fit in that time. And as soon as something feels like a better use of my time, I could change. It's hard because I really enjoy it, and I think even if that job went away for whatever reason, I might still try to find another 1 day a week winery gig, just because right now the benefits make sense for me. I'm enjoying it.
And Lori tutors?
She does, yeah. She tutors in the afternoons, like when kids are out of school. She does, a couple hours, 4 days a week, mostly math for middle schoolers. And she's been doing that for a few years now, mostly remote. But she gets a lot out of it. The whole teaching aspect and watching kids, grow and do better. And spends a decent amount of time on it. I mean, even like any teacher, outside of when she's with the students. And for me, I guess that's to me, it like makes it clear to me that like she's enjoying this and seeing a lot of value in it, because she is trading money for time for money, and it's not in proportion, I think, to the benefit that kids get versus she gets, and she really enjoys it. So I mean, she could stop anytime she wants, but I mean, for me, like that's a great example of like something she's even done for free. Like she used to volunteer tutor at schools that in her past. So I think that's a good model, the way a lot of people think in retirement about working. You're not doing it to always just to supplement income. It's it's a productive use of time that's fulfilling.
What else is she doing?
She volunteers at a couple different spots. One is a botanical garden nearby, and then she also works at animal shelter, where she does some vet tech duties there.
Nightmare.
I mean, it was her path at one point was to be a vet, so it's a great chance to flex back to her past when she was a veterinary technician when she was still in college.
It's cool to see you kind of developing, like you went from this identity as a scientist, right? And you may have identified as other things, but I think primarily you saw yourself as a scientist, right? To now you're kind of starting to adding all these hyphens to like what it is that you do, right? I mean, we went wine tasting yesterday, and you have a ton of knowledge about wine. It's like really impressive, and it's something that you've learned over the past year or so, right? I mean, of course, it's a building of skills, and it's a way for you to communicate with people. It's access to the wine industry, which is really interesting, and it's kind of cool to see that, like, yeah, your work as a scientist may have changed, but you're kind of moving into the next thing. You're kind of graduating into the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've caught myself like daydreaming sometimes, like, oh, is this something like I enjoy enough that I'd want to do more with it? Like, do I want to learn more? I mean, I've made wine before. I'm a brewer, as you know, so I make mostly beer. But I've thought about like, oh, would that be fun to like be involved with a winery on the business side or whatever? I mean, I don't think I want to own one. I don't think that sounds very attractive to me, but I've wondered. But yeah, it has been fun to build skills. It was like something that was very hobby. I guess that's the right word to use. Like I used to go wine tasting a lot, where I used to live, and
This is a cheaper way to do it.
I learned a lot about it. This is definitely a lower cost area to do it in, and doing it as an industry person, there's a lot of discounting and free tastings and things. So yeah, I get a lot of on-the-job training / entertainment, and both Lori and I really enjoy that. So it is one of the parts, it is one of the reasons why we moved to a region where a lot of wine is made.
Yeah, right. No, it makes so much sense seeing you guys here. It feels very natural, like a natural fit. Whatever happened to I was always thinking you were going to do like your own brewery.
Yeah.
Like what, did somebody disabuse you of that notion?
No, I mean, well, maybe a little, but I think, and you're not alone in that, and honestly, I probably telegraphed that potential future more than any other one when people would ask me, like at my former job.
Yeah.
Like when the note went out that I was going to be leaving the company in a month, like every other person who knows me well, like would say like, oh, is it time to open the brewery?
Yeah.
I don't know. It still sometimes feels like more of a romantic idea.
Yeah.
Like the idea of like owning a brick and mortar business with hard product and like having to deal with seasonality and all that stuff as a small business owner, which you know better than most people. It starts to feel unattractive. Like originally, earlier on, it was like, well, the capital outlay to start a small brewery is a lot. Like getting money, right? You're definitely going to take money on something like that. I'm not going to self-fund that. It sounds silly. So I used to worry more about the money side. Like, oh, is that smart? Now it's totally different, where it's like, do I really want to tie myself down to a business like that that's going to take probably 2 years to get off the ground and open, and then I'm going to be saddled with something where in 2 years from now, my daughter's in college, And we have the freedom now to travel how we want. And oh, by the way, I now have a new business that's open and customers who hopefully like what I do. Well, now do I have to hire people? And do I want to do that? Do I want to sell a business? Like, so more often these days, like that's what I find myself. And I think Lori is largely in agreement with that idea. I mean, we still both have this romantic idea, like, oh, it'd be cool to like have something we made and talk to people about it. But sometimes I feel like maybe I'm scratching that itch by doing the winery job. I'm just talking about somebody else's product, which is great and is easy to talk about because it's really good. I didn't have to make it or take on any of the overhead, and I can quit the job anytime I want if I suddenly don't like it. That's the complete opposite of starting a brewery. So
It's like renting the career versus owning the career.
that's a really good way to look at it. I'm going to steal that idea.
Part of me wonders, you working, or like, I mean, you've been in some breweries helping to can stuff, and like you've seen really how the sausage is made on the business side of it. It's very different than that. It probably shone a light on the realities of that, you know.
Yeah.
Was that helpful? Or?
It is. I mean, yeah, and I did do a day helping out on the packaging line with canning and bottling, and
You texted me that day.
yeah, I know I did. I was so glad to do it. It was aspects of it were fun, but I kept finding myself echoing what a friend of mine who works in the industry told me once. He's like, you don't want to do that, man. He's like, brewing's a young guy's game. Like, you don't want to do that. And I see, like, you know, this place is much larger than anything I would be involved with, but like, you know, when the forklift goes down or whatever, like they're carrying 50-pound bags of grain around and like carrying them up ladders and like dumping them in. Like, that sounds awful. Like, I don't want to carry 50-pound potting soil that I get asked to carry.
Does the head brewer do that?
No, not well, head brewer might, but brewmaster no.
And you can't just, you know, rocket ship to the brewmaster position.
Not unless you start it yourself. But then either you're hiring a brewer, which is what is recommended by everybody who I've ever talked to, or you're doing it yourself. Yeah. Which at nearly 50, it merely sounds a little stupid. It sounds a little stupid because anytime I've like found myself getting more back into like manual labor, like working on this landscaping around you here, like doing like, you know, tens of loads of, you know, hundreds of pounds of gravel, like I don't really like that. And I have full respect for anybody who does that as a career or a hobby because it's really hard. Yeah, I'd rather make beer at a low scale and share it with people than, yeah. So I mean, I don't know, it sounds silly, but I find myself incapable of completely giving up the idea of maybe going into that, but it does not feel likely at all.
What would you tell somebody nearing their retirement date or early in retirement? Like, how does it feel?
It feels really good.
Like, is it better than you imagined?
Yeah.
Or is it what you imagined?
I think conceptually it's what I imagined, but since you can't really put yourself in the like, how does it feel before you feel it? Like on net, I mean, it feels really good. I do not miss work, you know, for others or full time, or I just don't. So I really love having as much flexibility as I do. Like I value that to a fault at this point. I really feel like right now I'm still in this, even though it's like 2 years feels like a long time, it's really not compared to the span of, you know, your typical career. So I'm still find myself like very much pushing against the idea of somebody scheduling my time, even if it's stuff I have to do. And like I've had to come to terms with that. Like, no, you idiot. Like you have to do this thing tomorrow because it needs to get done. Like that's okay. It's like, okay, this stuff gets done. So that's a little surprising. I wouldn't have anticipated that. I don't think anybody could. Yeah. I would say that's maybe like a third to a half of my day follows a kind of a rhythm, and the other, you know, the remainder, you know, generally more than half varies a decent amount.
It's unprogrammed.
Yeah, it's unprogrammed, I would say. And that fits me really well. I see some people, you know, crossing the line into retirement, and their time is much more consistent. Like I wake up, take a walk at this time, I have breakfast, I do this, I do that. So I think a lot of that's really personal, but
are you concerned you're gonna be able to keep this up long term?
It's a really good question. I don't think so. I think now follows more of a rhythm than I suspect it will. Well, we'll revisit this question in 3 years, than it will in the future. I mean, right now, you know, with our daughter still in high school, there's a structure to that, and it actually has a lot of, you know, follow-on effects that you're well aware of. Like, I can vacation here, I can't vacation here because of school, and at this time of day I need to be home because we're going to do this together, or I got to bring her to school because the weather's bad. That kind of stuff will change. All that stuff will change. So I suspect things are going to be pretty different a few years from now. We're going to be doing more trips. We have this idea of short, stays abroad in different countries. I'm really looking forward to that. I don't regret not being there yet. This is the phase of life we're in, and it feels really good, but I'm pretty excited. So I think it's not going to stay the same for me.
What's been worse than you expected?
Finding new people, finding friendships, relationships, because it's a double whammy when you both move and you don't have a job you're moving to. Because like most people, many people, a big part of my friend network came from people I would meet at work, and I don't have that. I meet people in the industry. I'll go to other wineries or to events and meet people. I've certainly met people through the winery I work at. We started a homebrewing club for beer. I'm hopeful that translates into some friendships, but I didn't anticipate, because I think I'm someone that makes friends reasonably well. It's not very easy to make good friends, deep friendships, right? Those take a long time. But, acquaintances, I think I'm pretty good at that, and that's not so easy when you don't have those common reference points. That has been harder than I thought.